The gendering of discord is a fascinating topic, and we'll be looking at it today in the light of the ancient epics and mythologies of war that we've discussed in the previous segment. You might wonder why we care about ancient mythology or religious texts that few people read in any detail, but it's instructive to see how deeply ingrained into our collective psyches these stories and ideas can be and how they persist in popular culture. Think, for instance, of all those jokes about nagging wives and henpecked husbands. We may not take them seriously, they may only be in good fun, but what explains their enduring appeal? Is there not a barely hidden subtext that says that we all know that women really do nag their husbands, talk too much, don't know what they want, sulk or pout for no reason, start fights with other women, influence their men, and so on? We're all familiar with the burden laid on Eve's shoulders for having offered and persuaded Adam to eat the apple, thus introducing suffering and evil into the world. What might seem to many people today to be a minor aspect of a religion followed by millions of people around the world has, in fact, been taken very seriously by thinkers, philosophers, and clergy for almost 2,000 years. But Eve is not the only woman to bear the burden of bringing discord and evil into the world. Remember when we said that so many ancient epics revolved around wars, and that these wars could be seen as civilizational battle of defining values? Well, it's interesting to see who starts these wars, or at any rate, who shoulders the blame for them.
The Trojan War of the Iliad is caused, we're told, by Menelaus' wife, Helen, who runs away with Paris, who's the son of the king of Troy. Obviously, this is a blow to Menelaus' honor, and thereby the honor of his people. And he must wage war on Troy, both to bring his wife back, of course, but also to be avenged on the state of Troy for the insult to his honor. And thus begins a war that lasts more than 10 years and leaves almost no one alive at its end, all because of one woman's infidelity and fickleness in love. Helen is like a pagan Eve, bringing evil and death into the world and upon her people. But the gendering of discord goes even deeper than that. Homer, who's a supposed author of the Iliad, is working from myths older and more widespread than this one text. In these myths, there is in fact a presiding deity of discord. Would it surprise you to know that it is female? A goddess called Eris. Was Eris already known to be the goddess of discord before she caused discord? Was she given the status after creating discord? It's hard to say. But it is enough to know that when Eris is not invited to a wedding to which literally everyone is going, she chucks a golden apple with the words "for the fairest" written on it into the midst of the party where there are three goddesses, Athena, Hera, and Aphrodite. Each one thinks she is the fairest and the apple is for her. Not being able to agree, they go to Paris, who is known to be a good judge of such things, and to decide between them. Each goddess tries to bribe him, but Aphrodite wins by promising him the most beautiful woman in the land, Helen. Whether Helen goes willingly with Paris or is abducted, we will discuss in the next segment. But for this segment, it's enough to note that the slighted woman, Eris, seeks her revenge by exploiting female vanity, thereby triggering the greatest war of its times.
But what does all of this have to do with us today? Do you think these ideas persist in contemporary culture?
Remember this woman?
Yeah.
Maleficent?
Mm-hmm.
Most recently seen in a very popular, much watched Disney movie. Wicked Fairy, who was not invited to the birthday party, the royal celebrations of the Princess Aurora, and who, out of annoyance, curses the baby princess. Do we know why she wasn't invited?
No.
There you go. There's never a good reason for why the woman is discarded or ignored in the first place.
But what we do know is that out of petty vindictiveness, Maleficent casts a curse on the castle and all of its people, which only a special kind of man can break. So it's interesting to see how this works when the slighted or overlooked person is male. We could consider, for instance, the biblical story of Cain, who kills his brother Abel because he's angry at having his gift rejected by God. Or we could consider Lucifer, who's angry with God for not being the chosen one as he thought he deserved to be. So Cain is exiled, and Lucifer starts the great war in heaven, eventually transforming into Satan. So contrast the immense magnitude and scale of these rebellions and the degree of gravitas granted to their crimes and emotions as against the pettiness, fickleness, and vanity that's attributed to the women. It might be worth remembering that if Paris had not allowed himself to be bribed by any of them, much less Aphrodite, the entire war could have been averted. Yet, the blame for the Trojan War is placed on Helen.
Did she go willingly? Was Helen seductress or victim? And as always, why should we care? Let's take a closer look at these issues. Artistic interpretations of stories, myths, even religious texts are often a good index of the ways in which these are or have been seen at any given point in the history of a culture. So in continuation of our discussion of the gendering of discord, it's interesting to see the ways in which Helen and Paris are depicted. It's evident from paintings like this one, for instance, that the artist wants the viewer to decide whether we think that Helen goes willingly with Paris or not. We see that she seems to be drawing away, but the little Cupid at her feet looks like he's pushing her towards Paris. It's hard to tell, however, whether Helen wants to go with Paris but knows she can't because she's married to Menelaus, or whether she has no interest in Paris. She's smiling a little, her expression is soft, maybe she's simply shy, or even coquettish, not wanting to openly agree to the plan of running away that Paris is clearly indicating with his outstretched arm. Was Helen abducted, taken by force, or did she seduce Paris? Were they in love? Did they elope like star-crossed lovers?
Do we have the answer to these questions? Or is there a deliberate ambiguity to the scenario that the artist is exploiting? We see a similar kind of ambiguity in the depictions of the myth of Leda and the Swan. Zeus is attracted to the human Leda and comes to her in the form of a swan. There's no question of consent or mutual love or even desire. He is a god, she is a human woman that he can have if he wants. Yeats's poem on the myth makes clear that he interprets the union as one of rape. But for the most part, artistic depiction of this story have exploited the ambiguity at its heart. Is Leda in love with Zeus, the swan? Does she reciprocate his desire? Does she seduce him, or is she forced into the sexual union against her will? Most depictions leave the answer to this question up to the viewer to decide. Leda is the mother of Helen. As a result of her union with Zeus, were born two sets of twins, Helen and Clytemnestra, symbolizing beauty and deceit, and Castor and Pollux, the warrior twins. Taken together, Leda bore beauty and war together. So seen this way, it may not be surprising to note that Helen brought war, Clytemnestra was unfaithful to her husband and killed him when he returned from that war, and Castor and Pollux died fighting in that war. You could say that feminine beauty has always been seen as a double-edged sword, seducing and deceiving hapless men, causing them to go to war with each other and bringing death, disaster, and destruction upon their people.
So, the next time you hear the question, what do women really want? Or some version of, it's impossible to know what a woman is thinking or what she will want next. And you wonder why this notion of the inscrutable nature of women is so widespread and so persistent. It might be as well to trace this back through popular culture to the old myths and stories from religious texts around the world.